Good morning everyone and welcome to the show. Fernando.
Welcome guys.
Today we're going to show you how us, mainly him, installs a backup camera. We get tons of questions about how it's done, the process, and most of the time we find out about it after you guys have tried to do it and it doesn't work. So today, if you're watching this, if you install it this way, it'll work every time. Every time. Stay tuned. Now, even though the camera doesn't matter, you're going to want to know what camera we're installing. For today's project, we're using the EchoMaster Cam LF-DPL-N. This is a license plate camera with dynamic parking lines that are generated from the movement of the vehicle. They're not tapped into anything in the car. They just work off of centripetal force and turn as the vehicle turns. Opening it up, of course, you get instruction manuals. We're just going to set these aside because they're dangerous. License plate frame. The reason why we use this one a lot is because, as you can see, it's super thin. It doesn't look like there's a camera in there, and it has a spectacular image on it. Coming off of the camera, there's a pigtail, and it is 4.5 feet long. There is also two little loops here at the end. One of them, the blue one, is for what they call trajectory lines, or those dynamic parking lines. If you cut it, it'll turn those off. And the second one is for mirrored image, meaning if you're gonna put this on the front of the car, you'd wanna cut this so that it looks the right orientation. Next, there's two harnesses and a bag of screws. And these are the two pieces we wanna talk about. This is the power for the camera. It plugs into this little guy right here. The reason why this is 4 feet is so that you can go through any grommets you need to go to before you get to this big head here and the RCAs. There's an arrow on the top here. It matches up with the arrow and it just plugs together. Then you have 3 essential wires coming off of here. You have an RCA, you have an accessory, and you have a ground. And then you have this. This is the problem that everyone runs into. This is an RCA and it has this little red wire on it. And everybody wants to use it for something. Let's just nip this in the bud right now and we'll remove it. We don't want to use this for anything. This has a female end and a male end. The female end plugs to the camera in the back. The question is, what am I doing here, right? Okay, this is a 22 gauge power wire. It has a red, it has a black. This is accessory, this is ground. We're going to take these two and we're going to stretch them out and we're going to have an equal length of both. This wire is going to power the camera. It's going to get hooked up behind the radio to the red accessory wire and the black ground. One other wire you may need to run, depending on how your installation goes, is a reverse wire. For that, we just use a simple 18 gauge purple wire and we'll stretch it out to match this. We'll cut all our wires to length. So that means we'll have an accessory and a ground run back, the camera RCA run back, and a reverse trigger run back. If you can get your reverse trigger someplace else, like in a kick panel or from a smart harness like this, in this case we're working on a Nissan and it has a smart harness for it, this will generate our reverse trigger. But don't worry, we'll show you how to find it just in case you don't get lucky enough to have a smart harness. The next thing we do is we take this is called split loom, meaning it's got a split down the center of it, and we take all 3 of these wires, and this is 1/4 inch split loom, and we cover them. This whole harness here is now run through the car and it's all protected, safe. If you have to go underneath the vehicle in a pickup truck or wherever, this is your wire. If you're not going to be going outside of the vehicle and you don't want to cover it in this, then I strongly recommend getting this stuff here. This is exterior Tessa tape. There's a difference. There's interior, which is fuzzy, fleecy, and feels like a hoodie. And there's this stuff here that you have to cut with scissors. It's high temp. It doesn't get all sticky and gooey as fast as this stuff does. You wrap this whole thing up. Use about a 1/4 roll. Next step is actually getting into the car and figuring out where you're gonna route our wires. In this case, we have this guy right here, meaning it's gonna go onto the trunk lid. And the thing we have to keep in mind is this guy right here, this little button. We wanna make sure that our camera doesn't get in the way of the push button so that they can still reach in and grab it. In certain cases, even though this is thin, it is too fat, in which case you're gonna wanna flip the camera. To do that, you have to take the camera apart. There's some screws here on the back, flip it, and then put it back together. There is one little area that you have to router out the aluminum on that side there, in which case the camera will mount like this, freeing up the room for your hands to get in there and unlock it. If you want to mount a camera up in this area, keep in mind the camera, if it's not perfectly in the center, is going to image off. Even a camera mounted here that is off of center almost 2 inches, by the time you're looking back here, if this is your center image, it's gonna look like this. When backing up, that can screw up your perception of how things actually function. You may actually get into an accident, so be careful. Factory can get away with it because they use DSPs, not the audio kind, but the signal kind. They can crop and correct for the fact that the camera's off center. When you replace a factory radio, sometimes that processor is not retained and the camera goes off to one side or the other. If your radio has backup lines in it, you can adjust those backup lines to compensate for that, to put in a new center if you like. First step is remove all these tabs. We're going to drill a hole into the area here, and we have to run our wire along the factory route. In the beginning, we had said the cable from the camera was 4 feet long, but if you notice, the connection is right here. What we've done is we've bundled up the cable and zip tied it to the harness. The reason why we've done that is we don't want to run our cable all the way and zip tie and make that connection 4 feet away. We want to keep it as close to the camera as we can. We just want to get this into this area. If we ever have to service the camera, you don't want to have to crawl up underneath the vehicle or into a side panel. You want to make it easy to service. To waterproof the hole, we're going to use our 3M strip caulk, part number 08578. It's a black beetle rubber that sticks to almost anything, including your skin, and never really dries. You don't have to worry about it cracking or peeling or anything like that. We prefer to use it on the back side so that it doesn't get all messy up here with paint and whatnot, and if he has to change his license plate. It also will stick to rubber. If you're needing to put it on like a rubber boot or something like that, or a grommet, it will stick right to it. This stuff is sticky. It's great stuff. If you'll notice here, this is the RCA. We use 1/2 inch heat shrink to cover this up. Because it's inside, it's just standard heat shrink. However, if it was going to be outside of a car, we'd use silicone filled heat shrink, the kind that as you heat it up, it adds silicone to keep it waterproof. For here we use 1/2 inch, and then at the connection where the 2 arrows connect together, we use 3/8. Because it's inside, normal, but if it was outside, we'd use silicone filled. Once the silicone filled has dried, it is okay to remove, but while it's not, don't try to remove it because it'll just make a god-awful mess. We've also covered the wire with the same split loom that the manufacturer is using here and zip tied it all into place in preparation to run it through the car. But now, since we're at this point, we need to tap our reverse trigger. Finding the reverse trigger, the first thing you want to do is figure out where the reverse lights are. A lot of people will automatically start looking here thinking that that's where the reverse lights are. In a lot of cases they are. However, sometimes they are located here and here, and you'd want to grab them while you're putting the camera up in and running your wire. Sometimes they're located down beneath the car. So it is good practice to check before you start at this point to figure out where your reverse lights are located. In this case, our reverse lights are located in this area here. You want to start by, just like up here removing this panel, is removing the side panel in your vehicle to get access to the back of the reverse lights. In some vehicles, you'll be able to see the back of the bulbs located here. In this case, we're not that fortunate. The bulbs are located behind this piece of metal. What's coming in is this plug. This guy is where we want to do our probing. Turn the car on and turn the headlights on. And what we're looking for is a output that doesn't register any power, because the bulb should be off. And with the parking lights on, we should get voltage on some of the lines. like this. Once we've figured out which ones aren't doing anything and which ones are doing, put the car in reverse. Check to make sure that the reverse lights are on. In some situations, the engine has to be running for the reverse lights to be on. Therefore, if you're probing it without the engine running, you won't find the wire you're looking for. GM, a lot of GM. Go back to our plug and test for the reverse trigger. Once we find it, it should tell us our voltage here. Take it out of reverse, it'll go away. Put it back in, and there you go. When we tap into this wire, it will send the 12 volts up to our radio, in which case, like on a Pioneer and a Kenwood, and most radials, it's a purple-white wire. Alpine, it's not, it's orange-white. Just make sure you check your owner's manual to find the right wire that you need to connect to. Once your reverse trigger is connected, of course, put the panel back together, zip tie it into the factory harness, and move it towards the front of the car. In this case, we opted to go ahead and put loom over the whole wire. Remove the back area here, back seat, side panel, floor sills. That gave us a clear view of the factory wiring harness, which we then zip tied our harness to here in the rear. We removed this and have already reinstalled it and zip tied our wire all the way up into the front. This particular vehicle, we had already lowered the knee buster portion of the dash, so now we can attach it to our factory wiring and run it across into the main area where the radio goes. Now that we're done running the camera, the next step is prepping our harness. We need an accessory, red, black ground, and whatever our trigger for reverse camera is. In this particular instance, we're doing an Alpine. Alpine uses orange-white, which is typically illumination in most manufacturers. Always check your owner's manual to see what color your reverse trigger is. Off to the side here, we've teed in and we have our 3 outputs that are going to go to our camera. Make your connections behind the radio and plug in your camera. Make sure when plugging it in that you connect it to the right input. For example, this one says rear view camera, but on the harness, there's a second yellow input. This one says front. Pioneer uses brown to denote rear camera input, but Kenwood has 4 yellow inputs and outputs on the back of the radio, and they're all grouped in one spot, and they write what the camera does on the metal frame of the radio, so sometimes it can be hard to figure out which one it is. But if your camera isn't working, that could be the problem you have, is you plugged it into the wrong thing. Check twice. This particular camera has a screw here and a screw here to allow us to pivot the head to get it just the right angle we want. We've also put in our own Allen head M6 screws that we order on Amazon to go into these, so if you're wondering what size screws you would need, you want to look for an M6. Before you put the dash all back together is a good time to make sure it works. And we have a nice picture of the ceiling. As you can see in this one, it has the cones. We can deactivate those in the Alpine, but we have a great view of the back. As you can see, the dynamic lines will turn, but as soon as you stop, they go back straight. And as you can see, as you turn the wheel, the lines don't move. As long as you're moving, just like in a jet ski, they'll turn to show you where you're going. That's basically it. That's it. This is how we do every backup camera that walks in the door. We hope you guys found this helpful. Fernando, end the show.
On to the next one, guys.
You guys have a great night as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye.
Bye.